Welcome to Be On The Call podcast, where we tell the stories of those people behind the jobs we rely on. We go into the good, the bad and the ugly, and we shine a light in what could be a dark place. Just a warning, the content can be graphic and distressing, so please use your discretion. Please like and subscribe on your podcast platform and our social media. And if you have feedback, I read every single one. Let's get on to this episode of Beyond the Call. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Call. Today, I'm delighted to have a guest that some of you may know. His name is Matt Checchin. Matt is a former NRL referee. He's been an NRL official for over 20 years. In total, 570 matches, according to my information, and that includes being touch judge and video referee. He refereed 3 grand finals, 13 international test matches, and he retired in 21. Matt, welcome to the show. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So we're going to start from the beginning, and then we're going to go through, and obviously there's a lot to discuss. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a suburb of Sydney called North Ryde. The folks bought there in 1973. Back then, I still remember it was a street full of fibro homes. We were the only family to have a brick house in the street because it was covered in balustrades, being Italian heritage. Yeah, and that's where home was. I went to the local Catholic school, primary school, and then to Holy Cross College in Ryde.
And how were you as a student?
Oh, average at best. Doesn't work to potential, disturbs others in class. That type of comment was offered on his report card. I left school at year 10 and struggled in school. And I always just put it down to being intellectually challenged, I suppose. However, about 10 years after I left school, I went and got my pilot's license and absolutely nailed it. And you know, the math and the calculations used to get that is really, really complicated. So for me, if I have an interest in something, I take it on board. And if I don't, it's just a waste of time.
Fair enough. And that's the problem with the system, isn't it? It doesn't allow for people to learn in their own way.
Agree.
When you were at school, what was the childhood dream? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Aspirations growing up, you know, the first thing I remembered ever wanting to be was, you know, at the age of 12, and that was a referee. Back then, it wasn't a full-time gig. All your referees were pretty much school teachers or policemen generally. And it was, you know, they trained once a month and they went into their game of the weekend and that was kind of it. It was a supplementary job at best. But I used to get dressed up in front of the telly with my whistle in my hand and my uniform on and referee the game of footy that was on either, I think at the time, the ABC and Channel 10. We got 2 games a weekend. And then I used to kick a footy around the backyard to myself with a whistle in hand. And we had a retired neighbour out the back called Joe, and he used to commentate games between Manly and the Tigers because he was a Manly supporter. That's kind of all I wanted to do. I got the paper round so I could practice my whistle. I become quite obsessed. Yeah, it's quite bizarre.
Why refereeing? It seems it's not a common choice. Why refereeing? What appealed to you as a young fella?
Oh, look, I enjoyed the game. I wasn't very good at it, but I do enjoy officiating it. I used to referee my dad's soccer matches, the Old Buffers soccer matches. When I have played cricket, I always put my hand up to umpire when it's our turn to fill in. There's something about adjudicating or officiating that I really enjoy. I did it last week. I play in a twilight cricket comp here now where I've moved. We can never get umpires when it's our turn to do it. And I screamed at it and loved it. Plus, they give you 2 stubbies for every innings that you're umpiring, which is good fun.
When did refereeing become like a full-time job in the NRL?
It was when Super League came about. It would have been around about 1994, 95. Yeah, that was one of the things that Super League brought, not only a massive increase in pay for the players, but professionalism for officiating in rugby league. There were, I think it was Tim Mander, Bill Harrigan, Steve Clark, and 2 or 3 others who got offered Super League contracts, and then the ARL followed suit basically to keep their top officials. And then progression was very much on a part-time basis. I always kept a job while I was a full-time NRL referee. It suited my officiating. You know, very early on, a revs coach I had, Robert Finch, who was an ex-football coach. You know, I had an opportunity, a second chance basically at refereeing, and I said, I'll give up my job at Kennard's, the equipment hire company that I was working at. He said, I'll give you this opportunity on one condition, is that you keep your job. I looked at him quite startled. Most coaches want you as committed and dedicated as possible. He says, Matt, when you dedicate yourself to something, you tend to overdo it. You read more into things. You're the type of sportsman that is best when distracted, juggling several things at once. That's probably one of the most valuable things any coach has ever helped me identify about myself, because it's really good for me. Often, to be a good sportsman or good at anything, the more dedicated that you are, the more committed you are, the more successful you'll be. And that just does not suit all people. And, through my progression in footy and getting to know several players, there are plenty of players that the same. There are your super dedicated, super committed players, and there are others that just do it for sheer pleasure and enjoyment, and they're just as good.
So, I was looking at some statistics for a referee, just from your fitness and operational sort of, the way it goes. An NRL ref runs on average about 10 kilometres a game. You've got an average heart rate around 85% of your maximum heart rate for the majority of that, and you're making over 400 critical decisions every game. How do you train for that?
Oh, look, it's, the physical aspect, you would assume, because of the physical demand that officials have, that the younger you are and the fitter you are, the better official you'll be. And there's nothing further from the truth. Towards the end of my career, I was in the bottom third of the pack from a conditioning type scenario. My urgency around the field was probably about 70% of what it used to be. However, my composure and my decision-making was better than it ever was. It dropped off quite quickly once I got to a certain age. That's when I knew to call it stumps. Towards the end, people call it shortcuts, but I just did. I had a good feel for the game, a good read for game awareness, and that allowed for less physical demand and less mental pressure in knowing when to adjudicate on something or when to simply let it go.
Positioning and that sort of thing, I guess, becomes more second nature.
Yeah, it does. Position becomes second nature, and in officiating in rugby league, sometimes you can be in a very poor statistical position and come up with a very, very good decision because there's so many moving facets to the game. There are players that are continually moving. The ball's rarely in view, and you're dealing with decisions at speed. Very different to, say, a cricket umpire or a tennis umpire, where you've got fixed lines, fixed angles, and that's why video type scenarios in those games suit them much better than in rugby league. We say rugby league's very grey, and it is, and it's what we love about it, but it makes officiating extremely subjective. And that's why I was very poor in the bunker. I was good on the field, having a feel for something and knowing when to jump in and when to jump out, but I don't analyze things well. I'll look at 3 different camera angles and come up with 3 different decisions, which isn't good when you're in the bunker.
And I guess that's the frustration that people see at home, is that they see 3 different decisions with 3 different camera angles. When it is subjective, you're going to see it through your own eyes.
Oh, totally, 100%. I remember once we had 30 referees, the top referees in Australia, in a room, and we told half of them to leave the room and looked at the same decision. The only difference between the 2 decisions was one had commentary, the commentators from the game, and the others had that commentary muted. The decision by the 15 that saw it with the commentary to a person was 100% different to when the other 15 watched it without the commentary. That tells you that not only do we have especially if you support a side, a bias towards the side, but you actually see with your ears. And that's why a good bunker official now is someone that can explain and communicate what they're seeing. So they're actually, I suppose, guiding the audience and guiding the commentators into what they're seeing and the actual decision that they're coming up with, rather than just going, oh, no, Troy, how did they come up with that? Didn't they see this? Didn't they see that? By explaining things and by discussing what you're feeling and seeing, you'll take people along the path with you and generally have them thinking the same way.
You think there's scope to improve the viewers' or experience with the bunker, where we can kind of go in and see how it works, or is it something that needs to be Yeah, you think how it is right at the moment.
Look, I think the more exposure anyone can have with officiating, the better. We have people that have been in our game and at the top of their game in different fields. People like Wayne Bennett, people like Brad Fittler, Cameron Smith, that come in and see how we do things as officiating, what we have to do and how we have to think and process things, and also in the bunker. And they nearly all of them say to a person was, I had no idea. I used to, Wayne Bennett said, if a player does something wrong, just penalise it, just penalise it. They'll learn, they'll react, they'll change, just penalise it. The reality is that the game gave up and got frustrated with officials before the players learnt to change their behaviour by just penalising it. And I'll use a scenario, roll ball. Roll ball is something we crack down on every 3 or 4 years because it gets to a point where there's basically no play the ball. The game gets too quick, it's too frantic, too many mistakes, too many offsides, and it just makes it untidy. So we have a crackdown and, player must make a genuine attempt to play the ball with the foot. And for the first half of the season, everyone goes through a great deal of pain because officials don't like penalising the side in possession because generally it's the side that's defending that will infringe. And there's a whole heap of frustration and angst. The game doesn't have any sort of momentum in how it's displayed, which is poor from everyone's point of view. However, with referees going up with their, I suppose, requirement and players' skill level increasing, it gets to a point where both meet and then the game gets into a rhythm, a really, really good rhythm. So as an official, when you've got a great game of footy, the last thing you want to do is step into it unless you really have to, because you know that this game's flying. It's going from one end of the field to the other. No one's complaining. No one's got time to, moan about anything. And towards the end of that season, you start to let a few roll balls go. And the game accepts it because it was a great game of footy. That goes on and on and on and on and on to the point where unless we revamp it every 3 or 4 years, it becomes like scrums have become today. A scrum nearly now is an opportunity for a TV commercial. There is no contest. There never has been. But, people complain about that. But the reality of a scrum was when I fell in love with the game was you'd refeed the ball 2 or 3 times every scrum. And often a game of footy would be decided by a scrum penalty in front of the post. So it caused a lot of stop-start. And now we've got pretty much a generation of player that has never had to push in a scrum. So if you start getting players to contest scrums like they do in rugby union, you're open to a lot of injuries, and I don't think anyone wants that for our game. So I think, that's why people get frustrated. I get frustrated too. As a referee, because I'm not a black and white referee, I'm thinking, oh God, we've got another crackdown. It's on roll balls, or it's on the 10 meters, or it's on something else. And however, there's a reason for it, and it's for the betterment of the game long term. Otherwise, if it goes too far, we just never get it back.
You think you were protected enough when that happened? Because you guys were obviously the public face of those crackdowns, and you copped lots of shit. Did the NRL protect you guys enough?
Look, the NRL pretty much would give us any resource they wanted to. But, and this is just the reality of what it is, the NRL are quite happy when we've got refereeing controversy. There's no better negative news to sell. It used to be newspapers, whatever it is now, it hits or feeds or whatever it is, from a referee making a mistake or having a controversial game. Because it doesn't stop mums and dads from letting their kids play footy. It doesn't stop sponsors from sponsoring club sides. It makes people talk about the game. When it's about other negative aspects, be it player behaviour, concussion, any other negative aspect of our game, it has a negative long-term impact on our sport. But when it's about a referee stuff up, it's, like we will, and they will provide us with all the coaching and all the support that we need. However, they also are very aware that, it's good, bad news to have.
Yeah. It's the least damaging of the negatives.
Yeah. Look, it's not good for an official because he'll get the pup, and it's not good for an official's boss because after a while he'll get the punt. The managers above them will know when to step in and make the required changes so they can be seen as acting on the best part of the game. But it's a cycle that has never changed. Referees every 2 to 3 years are in crisis, and, we need change, and we need an ex-player or an ex-coach in there to control the referees. And then in 3 or 4 years' time, we need an ex-referee to, it's great. It's great drama to have in our game. And as officials, once you're involved, you get to know that quite well. One of my first games was at Parramatta Stadium. It was the Tigers and Para. Tim Sheens was the coach at the time. He knocks on the door. Tigers had lost. He goes, "Chech, Tim here, young referee, good referee. You did well today. However," he said, "this is our 4th loss in a row. I'm under a bit of pressure. So is a few of my players. I need to distract, and I'm going to go to town on you at the press conference. No hard feelings." Close the door. We all looked at each other and thought, that was a bit strange. Sure enough, he ripped into us in the press conference, and that's all anyone wrote about in the paper for the next 3 or 4 days. Tigers won the next week, and pressure was off. And, people say, "Oh, that's wrong. That's terrible." And I'm thinking, well, if I'm Tim Sheens, I need to do what I need to do to make my side successful. And that's just how it rolls.
Yeah, and coaching's so much more than just on the field performance. It's managing that off-field stuff as well. And blaming you is quite easy, and it's a great distraction. It's very clever.
I chatted to Wayne Bennett once on a flight to the UK, and he pretty much said that my role as a coach game day is almost nothing. I said, "What about replacements?" He goes, "No, I've got someone for that." I said, "What about halftime speech?" He goes, "They're not listening." He said, it's all about the preparation we've done before that day, and, making sure everyone's connecting well, gelling well, we've prepared and we've got no injuries. And based off that conversation, which went for a couple of hours, we talked footy for probably 5 minutes, and the rest of the time was about movies, shares, real estate, social matters. And I walked away going, I bet he's like that with his players too. It's not all about footy. It's making sure you're happy as a person and your family, and you gel well with other people in the side. So, yeah.
He's famous for being a man manager rather than a football manager.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So what would a typical Monday to Sunday week be for a referee?
It depends on when you had officiated last. So I'll just say I did the Channel 9 game on Sunday. Monday would be, Sunday night I'd generally go home and watch the game again. We get access to the game with our audio, and our audio is not only my audio, but the other 2 officials and the match day coach, and basically go through. You generally know when you walk off the field that you've made 2 or 3 decisions you'd like to have a closer look at. Sometimes there's stuff ups, and other times you're going, "Oh, I hope they're right." But there's a whole heap of other, probably 10 to 20 other decisions where you either made the right decision, but you haven't communicated it well, or, you really should have been somewhere else. Your focus or attention should, there's plenty of other things that will come up for discussion. Could be an obstruction ruling, and, is this right? Is this wrong? With, the impact of letting something go down one end of the field, and what impact did it have later in the game with the same side or the different side, and how could that come back and bite us in the bum, and all those type of things. And from that, you'd make 50 or 60 notes. And then Monday morning, you'd hop into the water, have a recovery session. Generally, sometime Monday, you would meet as a team again. So yourself as the referee, 2 sideline officials, and you'd have an assessor or a match day evaluator who basically, by then, all your critical decisions that were right or wrong. They're decisions that have a direct impact on the score of the game, or an impact in a controversial or a talkative matter. So it might be, if you've got a 40-0 game, there'll be very little of those decisions. However, if it's a 40-0 game and you've missed a high tackle and a player's been injured, then you've got one of those critical decisions. What do we need to do as a group of officials? What were you looking at? Who was in your way? Who else could have assisted? That type of thing. So as a team, we'll meet for 2 hours and basically go through cut clips and replays and things like that. And then after lunch, we meet as a squad, as a group, and we talk about basically decisions where out of those individual meetings, there may be 5 or 6 where we're unsure what to do. where's the squad at with this? Have I let advantage go too much in this scenario for this scoreline, for this field position? The ref's boss thinks, okay, I've got Matt doing this and I've got Ashley doing that. I need to get the squad closer together. And they're two examples to have. So then we'll have a discussion. We call it a Harold session. Sometimes it's over and done in half an hour, and other times it just goes on and on and on. And sometimes it gets to a point because you've got a group of officials that are very good at what they do. They want what's best for the game, and often the room will be split 50-50, and the debate will be sometimes hideous on why the other person thinks it's wrong. And often that will get parked. Tuesday is generally an off day. That was a day where we could commit to our family or could commit to another form of employment. Wednesday would be a gym day in the morning, a field session in the afternoon, and then a light sort of recovery session after that, followed up with another meeting. And then Thursday or Friday, you'd either come in depending on when you would be officiating again that weekend. So it's all about them preparing for the following game. You'd meet with your group. These are the two sides we got. This is what happened last time they played. I might give Ash a call and say, mate, I've got the Tigers. How were they last week? Anyone have the shits about something or, that type of thing. So it's more preparation on how to officiate best based on what we know at the time. Now, some officials do that to a great deal and other officials don't do it at all. And I was one of those. I felt every time I went into a game expecting something or preparing for something to happen, it didn't. And I was instantly off guard. One of the best games I think I ever officiated was a State of Origin. I forget what year it was, but I remember I had to do a tender for Kennards Hire, a big tender, and it was due that day. I was just in the hotel punching out this tender, got it submitted, had a shave, hopped in the shower, and was like a couple of minutes late for the car downstairs to go to the ground. Went out there, refereed. I think we blew 3 penalties in the game. Cracking game of footy in Queensland. It was just brilliant. And I remember a journo coming up and say, Church, fantastic performance. How did you prepare? And I couldn't tell them the truth because I was scared of saying, for me as a person, when I'm distracted, I do really, really well. If I wouldn't have had that tender, I would have sat there in that hotel room all day thinking, oh, this might happen. That might happen. If this happens, I've got to do that. I've got this. And then I would have gone out there exhausted.
So the old saying, play the ball that's in front of you. If you use all your nervous energy, then you're already having an effect.
But that suits me. And that's where it's too often I felt like I wasn't as good because I wasn't as committed. Being committed didn't work for me. And if it does work for you, that's fantastic. But it doesn't mean you're better than I am. And it took me a long time to feel comfortable with that. And it often took a lot of refs coaches, because I've been through a heap of them, a while to figure that out. It was like, oh, I'm not sure about Chech. He's a bit of a larrikin and he's always stuffing around and he's always on the first car out of training and stuff like that. However, over time, they get to know that, you need balance and balance as an individual, but also balance in the squad. Sometimes a smart ass comment from me in a really heated situation in our squad room is exactly what we needed to break the ice. Yeah.
So you famously made your debut. You came on at halftime. Was it the Tigers and Cowboys?
No, it was Tigers and Cowboys was my first full game. My halftime game that I come on was the Warriors and I think they were Northern Eagles at the time. Manly were in front, 16-0 at halftime. Stephen Clark was the referee. He went into a game with a bit of a dodgy calf. It got to the point where he basically got the hook at halftime and was told to collect it. So I went out there, refereed, run around like a headless chalk, went in to award a try at the very end to the Warriors. I wasn't sure, couldn't see the ball. Went up to the video referee, and I'm pretty sure that if the try would have been awarded, they would have won the game because it was 16-0. The video referee back then had a choice of a green light for a try, a red light for no try, and a yellow light for I've got no idea. The video referee at the time was Michael Stone. He comes back in my first game and goes, I've got no idea. It's 16-0. It's back to you. And I genuinely had no idea whether it was a try or not. It was one of those held up ones. I just could not see the ball. I did what I suppose I was always taught, and that was to lean on the rules when unsure, and that was benefit of the doubt goes to try scoring side. And that was the simplest way I could do it. I ordered the try, and that was it.
How common are injuries to referees?
Yeah, really common. I was lucky, never had one. I got dropped plenty of time from stuff ups, but never from injuries. The older you get, a lot of referees do calves, hammies. We do a lot of training, and it has changed a lot. We used to run a lot more than what we did, but as the squad's gotten older, the league have realised that with a lot of money invested in these officials, we need them out there, even if they're 1 or 2% slower than what they could be. At least we're going to get more out of them by doing what we do. So a lot is based around recovery, but it does happen a lot. I would say on average, every second week, we've got a full-time official that's not officiating because of some sort of injury.
So how often were you like a reserve referee before you actually got your start at that halftime? How many times did you miss a gig?
Wow. I had refereed by then. I'm just trying to do the math. I'd been refereeing for over 11 years and in and around first grade for probably 7 years, either as an in-goal touch judge or as a touch judge and things like that. Look, different things happen. A lot happens with officiating generally. If you can stick and stay long enough, very hard to get rid of or very hard to get dropped. But a lot of referees come and go, or they used to, in and out of first grade. I think a bit like players, I think the average game a first grade player plays is 23 as far as a career total. So there's a lot of them that do less than a season of games, but there's a lot, the ones we all know about, that last a long time as well. So, look, I'd been told many times before I got to first grade that I'd never make it as a first grade ref. And I got told by very influential people during my first grade career that I would never referee again either. And I believed them a lot of the time too. I thought, oh, well, I've had my crack and I'm done. And as long as I'm involved and I keep enjoying it, I'll be okay. And I was lucky enough to get other opportunities.
So when you weren't refereeing for the NRL, were you doing other comps?
Yeah. So back then it was called Metro Cup, which was basically a shit fight every weekend. It was full of wannabes and has-beens. It was really hard and tough, park footy. I was pretty fortunate. I did that for so long. I think that's where I got my really good man management skill from, to referee that type of footy. It's not about accuracy. It's about giving a lolly to you and a lolly to you and knowing when to step away from someone. So if you're getting flogged by 30 points, I may only take you back 9 meters and I might take the other side back 11 because no one benefits from a one-sided game. The more tackling that you do, the more tired you become, the more ill-disciplined you become, the more likely you are to hurt another player through poor tackle technique. It's just not good for anyone. So I do it as an official. If I can, I make sure you get the ball when you can to give you a break from tackling. The other side's leading by plenty. It's that type of man management. Unfortunately, the contradiction to that man management is poor accuracy, because to do that, you've got to make poor decisions. You're doing things differently for different sides.
You're not going by the letter of the law every time.
Biggest criticism is consistency. We want referees to be consistent. That is absolute, utter crap. Because if we were consistent, we would be blowing 30 penalties a game. And I've been down that path and no one likes it. So, I get a little bit of yuck in the back of my throat every time I hear that coach say or commentator say, all we bloody want is consistency. That is just crap. What we want is referees to get involved when we think they need to, or to stay out of a game when they can.
There's always criticism of the feel of the game, but you're saying you have a feel of the game and you're doing your best that you can do to sort of massage that feel of the game in a healthy way.
Yep. And the issue you have with refereeing a game with feel is that it's very easy to cut a game afterwards and say, Matt did this here, but he did this there. Two totally different things. So one's right and one's wrong. No, they were both relevant for the game situation or field position at the time. Almost impossible to coach other than to go through with experience, and even harder to justify. So my bosses about 10 years ago started to try and justify everything. And you can do that with accuracy and stats, but in doing that, you're taking away a lot of that feel for your officials. And that's probably the most, for me, what wasn't, it wasn't frustrating when I copped in the newspaper or I copped from social media. The most frustrating thing for me was trying to officiate it in a way that was enough to please my boss, but also enough to get a good game of footy. And that was really, really tricky because, my boss at the end of the day could justify his job with statistics for a certain period of time. But if the game got jack of poor officiating through stop-start play or poor games, guess what? My boss was the first to go. It's really tricky for everyone involved. And, I got asked this weekend, Matt, would you ever consider coming back to the NRL as a ref's boss? And we went, no, because you've got too many people to try and please. You've got a group of officials, 20 of them, only one gets a grand final. So the other 19 are already on the nose with you. You've got half the coaches that have got the shits with you every week because their sides have lost. You've got the administration wanting to go one way with certain aspects of the game, and you've got commentators wanting something different as well. You just, for those coaches that have lasted a long time, they were very, very clever and very, very skilled at what they did. And for me as an official, the coaches I tended to work well with were ex-players or footy coaches, because they just had a really good sense of knowing, what works well for me works well for me. And, for the, Ashley Klein, it's very, very different.
Does it get frustrating, the criticism of when you're getting players that have not played for 20 years and the game is very different? Do you get jack of that feel for the game criticism for that?
Well, yeah, I do. But I also know that, those players that, haven't played for 20 years, making comment about officials or decisions sometimes. And it's not a personal thing, but it's something that they feel, and it's exciting. I wouldn't say they're shock jocks, but it does create a position for them in the game that the game needs. I come off an international game once, and a commentator pretty much said, well, I think Matt got that wrong, and that cost a certain side the game. Now, from that, we got death threats. We got it was just hideous for weeks and weeks. Now, that commentator is a really good person, a really nice bloke, and someone who knows a lot about the game. And my decision was right. He wasn't doing it to be nasty or to be in any way detrimental to me whatsoever. We've all got roles in the game, and we all need the characters that we have. Like I said, my struggle as an official was often internally. It was just knowing how to get by, how to please my boss enough, and also how to get a decent game of footy. And that was not always, but often at loggerheads. Yeah.
Talking about characters, there's obviously some big names that are famous for being like the second referee on the field, e.g. Cam Smith and others. They've got a job to do. And, I've been a captain of a sports team, and your job is to have conversations with the referee. How do you keep them out of your head when you're making decisions? Was it something you struggled with, or was it just a conversation and then it was forgotten about?
Oh, look, it depends. And I don't think I ever took anyone's conversation and tried to throw it out of my head. I remember Darren Lockyer. He would say very little as a captain, to the point where if he did say something, it would be like, oh, what do you mean? Oh, okay. I see that. And you had other captains that would be F this and, oh, you're not giving us a fair go. And, it'd be same old story each time. But generally, if you treat them with respect and empathy, that captain that's going F me and never giving us a fair go, that is generally frustrated. And he's frustrated generally because he's losing, and he's frustrating generally because he's made a lot of mistakes, and it's easier to take it out on the ref than it is your teammate, because he's got to train with his team the next day and work with him again the next week. He can dislike Matt because he's not going to see Matt again for 5 or 6 weeks. And then it'll be best mates before the toss and we'll be right again. And if he wins, that we'll still be best mates. And that's why people say, what are you proudest of? Number of games or grand finals and things like that. The thing I think I'm proudest the most of is that I was the referee that started shaking captains' hands after every game. We always shook the hand before the game. Best of luck. Here's a coin. Be good boys. Off we go. But it was important for me to shake their hands, both captains, after every game. I just say, to say thank you, sometimes to say sorry, sometimes to have an uncomfortable conversation. But it was something that you had an opportunity to resolve then and there. And, out of all those games, I had one captain resist putting out their hand, but I left my hand out and he, thankfully, because it would have been a really yucky situation. And, I often replay to my head, what would I have done if they refused to shake my hand? And I think I would have rang my boss and said, you've got to get me to that training session tomorrow. I want to sit down with that captain and I want to close the door. And if we need to have it out with each other, we do it. When they said things that were hurtful and nasty, they have to be acted on, but they're never personal. It never lasts for a long time. I remember one of the big stuff ups I made was a 7 tackle in a semi-final in 2013. Cronulla was awarded a try on a 7 tackle and they ended up winning the game by 2 points. There were dramas everywhere. It was supposed to be the World Cup that year. That got cancelled and all that type of thing. I remember going to Neil Henry in New Zealand for the Nines and I said, Neil, you got a sec? He goes, yeah, Chich, what? I said, mate, I want to apologise. And he said, stop. He said, sharp. And I thought, oh, here we go. I'm going to cop it here. He says, don't apologise. He said, mate, I had Jonathan Thurston lose the ball twice in that second half, just drop sitters. He doesn't apologise because he didn't mean to do it. It's just part of the game. And I went, wow. Like in the heat of the moment at the time, of course there's disappointment and it's real. Oh, fuck. I've lost this game of footy and I've prepared my team so well all year and it comes down to 7 tackle try, but it also comes down to my skipper losing the ball in the second half, my winger not diving like they could have done to score the try in the final seconds of the game, and hundreds of other decisions. They know that. But at the time, it's, it's the ref's fault. And that's sport. I do it when I watch sport and get the shits with a decision that I didn't think went the right way. It's, that's why we love it.
Do you watch the NRL now?
Very, very little. I watch the girls play and love it. I think the reason why is that it's an 80s form of footy. 2 in the tackle, not particularly quick, a lot less complicated, still plenty of skill, but a simpler form of the game. I actually like watching the girls play footy more than the guys. And I think, again, that talks to me as a character, as a person. I'm not a complicated person. I'm not an analyst or someone that's in statistics. I like the big hits. I like the simplicity of things. But no, I don't. And my brother-in-law is Grant Atkins. My sister got married to him just over 12 months ago, and we'll have conversations when he visits or through the year and stuff like that. I had a call from a referee probably about a month ago. He was struggling with the decision. Something happened in the game that he thought he did the right thing, and the game come down heavy on him and said, Chetch, what do you think? What would you have done? And I said 2 things. I said, one, I haven't refereed for 4 years. I don't know what the feel of the game is. I said, you know why you're asking me, because you did what I would have done and you just want to feel good about it. And I said, mate, that's just not how it goes. Give it time. And in time, you'll go, okay, I did the right thing, or you know what, I probably shouldn't have. But, as an official, from what you've told me, you've analysed the situation, you made a judgment call, and it's one of those great decisions that either way you would have been screwed. If you would have jumped into it, you would have had just as much drama, probably more the other way. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, you were saying before about it was never personal. And so you came out as gay in 2012. And from what I can tell, it wasn't entirely your decision to come out as gay. There was a bit of background pressure that made you do that. What was that process like for you? And did that ever rear its head on the ground where it became personal?
Uh, I'll answer it in reverse. It never became personal on the ground, but I reckon 30 to 40% of my headspace was always worried about it. You know, what do I do as a now out gay person, or even back then closeted gay person, if someone calls me a name through me being gay, you know, calls me a terrible name with a gay aspersion? Do I, what do I do? How do I handle it? Because there's so many things to consider, and least of all, it's about me. It's about, if I pretend I didn't hear it, or if I don't make a big deal of it, what message am I sending other young people that could be struggling with their sexuality or whatever it is about them that is, I'm going to use a word different. You know, do I be very strong about it and act hard on it and then make that person feel bad? And then we've got that whole other scenario. So, yeah, it's like when I got called recently when the Manly players chose not to play because of the rainbow strip on their top, that still remember the call I got from the journo saying, "Matt, this is what's happened. What do you think?" And I said, "I'm just in shock." "Are you disgusted?" I said, "No, I just said I'm in shock. I'm really, really surprised because I know these players and I know these players respect me and I know I get along well with them. I just want to know why. I want to hop in a room with them and have a discussion because I know these players will have friends and relatives that are also gay." So I said, something's not right and something's not dealing with me about this whole scenario. But I said, it's not the word disgusted. It's not the word. I was in shock. I was really, really surprised. It's just because the game accepted me so well without any drama whatsoever. It just blew me away. I just didn't think, we had any issues anymore that we needed to be considerate about. Because I really did think things would change in some way, shape or form. I had two comments on the field after I'd come out and they were both really, really complimentary. And then I think after a while people forgot. People remembered me for the last stuff up I made, not, who I sleep with at night. So it's just, it just didn't become an issue because it wasn't, it's part of who I am and not something that I ever tried to hide. And, to the referees and my friends, it's certainly a lot more relevant. But to me, officiating on a footy field and my sexuality is no different to my religion, what type of car I drive or what my favorite color is, really. And that, look, it is always a massive deal for someone before they come out.
For sure.
But my experience is after doing so, whether it's to the NRL in this case, or to my mum or my dad, it's always gone a lot better than I worried about.
Do you think reactions like the Manly group are why we're not seeing a gay person out in the NRL at the moment? I mean, how many have we got? Over 500 players. So statistically, there would have to be a couple, just based on statistics. So there would be a few that you would presume would be in the closet, at least publicly. Do you think that's why it's still a culture?
I think possibly yes, but I think to individuals still today, and I can only speak about me and my experiences, before you come out, it's a massive deal. And that's why when there's anything adverse towards people's sexuality and how it's taken, there's always an impact. And to people that are struggling and struggling massively, that impact can be fatal. And that's where it's really, really, really serious. So other things where I've faltered, I'll often use gay words in a muck around jovial way around friends and officials. And I got pulled aside once by an official, someone I respect incredibly. And she said to me, Matt, you really got to be careful about making comments like that. And I said, why? I said, I'm totally comfortable with who I am. And you know that. And she said, but you don't know who else is in the room and what they're going through. And I just went, oh, fuck, you're right. She said, because they're seeing you and they're seeing how you react and they're seeing the words that you use, and they could be doing them a whole heap of harm. And I had no idea, because I was comfortable, because I was okay, and because I wanted everyone else to be comfortable with me. I'm very much, this is who I am. Let's bring it all out. But to other people, I could be making them feel worse and pushing them further away. So yeah, look, to answer your question, I don't think what happened with Manly is the reason why we've got players that haven't come out yet. I think we've got players that haven't come out yet because to them it's a very big deal, and they're worried about being treated differently by their friends, their teammates, their opposition. It does, whether you like it or not, it adds a different level to things and the level of complexity. Like I said, 30% of my melon was taken up by far out. What happens if someone calls me a faggot, and how do I react?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. And it's, there's plenty of gay people in other, even in WNRL, in Australian soccer and in women's soccer. It seems to be a lot more culturally accepted, and easy is the wrong word, but there's a lot more publicly out in those spaces. I can imagine the first person, obviously Ian Roberts was the first NRL player to come out as gay post playing. So the first person who comes out when they are actually playing is going to get a lot of noise. That's the hard part.
Look, and they will, you go back to Ian Roberts and yes, come out post playing, and his book was tremendous for me because it helped me identify who I was, because I didn't identify as a gay person because I thought to be gay, you had to be a certain way. I had no exposure to gay people. He took his partner with him on a kangaroo tour back in, I think it was 90 something. Teammates knew about it. Everyone accepted it. Everyone was great about it. It's, I just think a story like that is such a good one to tell. If it was okay back in the 80s or the 90s, surely now it's kind of just nothing. So I think a lot of noise will be a lot of noise that I got about it. It was front and back page for a day or two. And then that player is going to get judged on, how well they pass, run, catch, kick, tackle, and all the other things. So,
How did the process affect your relationship with the media? So I'm going to fill in some blanks, and correct me if any of these details are wrong. But for those that don't know, you were approached by a journalist a couple of years before you came out. He was going to break that story. You managed to negotiate waiting till your son was finished grade 12.
Yep.
Then he came back and said, okay, has he finished grade 12? Yep, cool, let's go.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's pretty much exactly what happened. And two things that I think need to be highlighted. One is when he called me and said, this is what we've heard, we're going to be running the story tomorrow. I hung up, I rang the NRL person in charge of media. He said, they'll run the story tomorrow. Get off the phone from me, call your family straight away, prepare them. When the journo rang back and said, we've agreed to hold it, well, I was just flabbergasted. I was blown away. Like, I'm just thinking, wow. Now, obviously enough people knew within the game that it wasn't a secret, because it wasn't a secret with the ref squad, and it really didn't become a secret. I am trying to think it was 2001 when I came out to the squad. So, it would have been known. So there's no issue there. But when that journo rang me and said, has he finished? I'm doing the math. He's finished HSC. I said, yeah, come on, bring it on. And let's do this. And it was a really, really good experience. I don't regret the way it happened. I don't regret holding it. Or, in hindsight, maybe I didn't need to. I think my son's mates would have been okay. However, I remember what I was like at my son's age. Everything was magnified tenfold. If there was 10% noise about it, that's 100% in his head. I wanted, as a parent, to try and prevent that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So we're going to get into a bit of the dark stuff now. Obviously, the abuse. So you mentioned before, and I don't know if you'd call it the mistake, but I looked at your Facebook profile and then the stuff that's publicly, for example, when you joined a job, and I clicked on some of the comments there, and they're vile. They are vile. Did you ever cop anything from the public to your face that has, even come 1% of what's on Facebook, etc., etc.?
Absolutely never. Never. Like, you get it on social media, and the other time you get it as an official is you're running up the tunnel. If people had guns, you'd get shot every game because they're red. They've lost it. You are just discussing your filth, your vile. And that feeling is very real for those people at the time. Now, surely I've bumped into some or a few of those people in life by being out and about. Never been an issue. Now, I had the odd comment, oh shit, give the Eels a fair go next time. You stuffed up last week, and I'd either have a laugh or go, oh, which decision? What didn't you like? And every time it would be an okay conversation. I never walked away going, oh, I feel threatened. I feel, and I think they walked away going, oh, Chech isn't a bad bloke, or shit, he said sorry, or shit, I understand why he made the decision he did. So I think as human beings, we're allowed to act and feel very differently when we're behind a screen or behind a barrier where that person that we're abusing and being disgusting to can't defend themselves. And that's not a good trait we have. And I've done it.
Absolutely. It's, realistically, you shouldn't be able to type anything that you can't say to a person's face.
Agree.
So your son grew up, he was old enough to read some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How did that go with your son and then with your partner?
Well, with my son, I still remember, when the game where the death threats come from, he said, Dad, he says, can you take my name off your Facebook page? He says, because he had his first son at the time. He says, I'm scared that something could happen. Someone might throw a rock at home. They tell you they know where you live, and they're going to kill you or they're going to get you. He was genuinely, he said, Dad, I do love you, but he said, I just want you to take me off everything. And I understood. I didn't feel offended or ashamed or embarrassed, or I felt guilty. I felt bad that I was in the squad in Brisbane at the time. And, my partner was in Sydney with an AFP police car parked out the front, just in case. I couldn't hold them and say to him, you'll be okay and we'll get through this together, because I was in a different state. And look, abuse for family and friends, in my opinion, is always much worse than it is for the official themselves, because there's a part of us, rightly or wrongly, that has become conditioned to it, and it's part of the course. But I don't think it should be. And I often harp on about this. Far North Queensland for many years have had a zero tolerance to abusive officials in junior sport. There's no second chance. You make one comment, you're out. You're gone and you don't come back. And it's so refreshing to go to footy matches where get them on side or give us a fair go it's never heard. It just doesn't happen. And what we've noticed is we've had a lot more officials come out of Queensland into the squad now than out of New South Wales. I think the reason why is the ones in New South Wales are the thick-skinned officials that have made it through all that garbage. How do we know someone that doesn't have a thick skin is a better official? Why does having a thick skin become a skill set for an official? How many are we losing that aren't? And it's got to start at all levels. And I remember being in a rules meeting once, and please don't ask me to name names, but it was raised that how about we get rid of the $10,000 fine for coaches after press conferences because it adds to the theatre and the drama. And the coach goes, that was on in the meeting, there were two coaches and one referee and two players. The coach goes, I know when I abuse Chech in a press conference, he doesn't take it personally. I know that. He knows it. I know it. He says, but what happens when everyone else sees me doing it? What are the coaches going to do at all different levels in all different games around the country? Do we want to be responsible for that? Do we want to say to everyone, it's okay to blame referees when a side loses a game? Because the reality is it's never about a referee. It's about hundreds of decisions in a game. Now, I know that when I've calmed down, but after a game, I'm not calm. So that $10,000 stops me from saying things that I shouldn't. So thankfully, that coach had enough nous to say, you know, and believe me, this is a coach that has been fined a fair few times. And it shows me that, you know, that person's a lovely person and a good person, but gets emotional, you know, and that's just a character that some of us have more than others.
And the problem is, it's not just, it's young kids coming through who are refereeing. And if they see it is open season on top grade refs, who the hell wants to go down that track?
No, totally. And look, and I still to this day, whether it's at the golf club or at the pub, why did you want to referee? What, you know, and when I say to people, look, there's something about me that likes adjudicating or being involved in decision-making that I enjoy. It's really, really, they look at me often like, you know, are you all there? Like, what would you want to do it? And genuinely, I felt it was my happy place. I loved it. You know, I still remember walking out to Wembley Stadium to referee an international game once and going, shit, I was a kid that used to run around to Pat's Dundas under sixes on a Saturday, and now I'm here. Yeah, just lucky, really, really lucky to, you know, it was a dream of mine. I don't know why, but you know, why is my favorite color green? Why am I gay? They're all, you know, parts of it, us as individuals that make us as a whole.
It needs everybody to be able to do everything. Otherwise, none of the hard roles in life would be done. And that's exactly why this podcast exists, because we want to look at the people behind these traumatic jobs. And I count professional refereeing as a traumatic job, as in the psychological trauma that you get from constant, you know, hatred, harassment, and criticism. It takes its toll. Yeah, and it's, if people like yourself didn't do it, we don't have a game.
Look, and I'll answer you genuinely, and I'm going to contradict myself. I will say to you that I don't believe it has taken its toll on me, because I feel comfortable and proud of the career I had. However, whenever I talk to someone about footy, mentally I feel fine. I feel really at ease with it. Physically, often I'll perspire. Now, getting the help that I've helped over the years, I've often asked, you know, what's happening there? And it's stress caused by trauma. It's trauma that I've mentally probably dealt with really well, but it's still trauma and it still has an effect, and it affects people very, very differently. You know, because, and it gets to the point now where if Brent and I are out somewhere and someone wants to talk footy, and I'll talk and I'll engage back. And afterwards, often he'll just put his hand on my shoulder and say, you okay, huh? And I'll take a deep breath and I'll look down and I'll be just wet. I go, oh shit, I didn't realize. You know what I mean? So there's certainly trauma there. And you know, and I often do think about it. I rarely think about the death threats. The negative aspect I still think about from time to time is the contradiction between what my bosses wanted and what I thought I needed to do. So it was all that internal stuff, you know, and I got help for the first time because at the time I thought my ref's boss hated me and was having all these conversations about me to everyone. And I remember sending this massive email to the sports psych saying, I hate this person. I'm going to quit. I'm going to leave. She said, come on, come for coffee. And sat down. She said, how you going? I said, okay. I said, everything I said in that email was true. She said, oh, no. She said, calm down. She said, I believe you. She said, how long have you worked for them for? And I said, 2 to 3 years. How long have you been feeling this way? I said, oh, for the last 6 weeks. She goes, okay. Has he changed in the last 6 weeks? I went, no. She goes, well, then who has? And instantly I realized that the issue wasn't him. It was me, because he's been the same person he always has been. The same coach, same individual. For some reason, there's a reaction in me that's different. There's something that's caused me to have all the conspiracy theories and the dark thoughts and the things like that. So, yeah, and that's why I say to people, you do a calf muscle, you go to a physio. If you're struggling mentally, go and get some help. It can sometimes be as simple as asking a few questions, answers you already know that you already know yourself, but just piecing them together. Like that sports psych didn't tell me anything. Just ask me questions to help me figure it out myself. And look, it's not always that easy. Some people have many, many sessions, require medication. Mental health means many different things to many different people. And to that same referee's boss's credit, I went back to them and said, I'm seeing a sports psych. And, this ref's boss was pretty old school. I wouldn't say it was new age. I got the grand final that year. So he still had faith in me as the best official in the game, even though he knew I was seeking mental health support.
My common advice to people is make sure you get a psychologist and get therapy when you're well.
Yes.
So that it can prevent, but B, if you are unwell, you are not starting from scratch.
Yeah, totally. And look, it's, I think, or my experience suggests that, like with anything, a lot of it depends on the connection you have with someone. If you try and get help and it doesn't work for you, it doesn't mean that getting mental health support isn't right for you. It means that you need to keep trying different people.
Absolutely.
And it's generally talking to as many people as you feel comfortable that you can about the scenario. And look, there's so many things that as individuals we're conditioned to react. I was a mental health ambassador for the NRL for a number of years, and I received 2 phone calls pretty quickly after it was launched from young officials considering suicide. My initial reaction was to say, don't be stupid. You're young. You've got the whole life ahead of you. You got nothing to worry about. That's silly. We're taught that is the worst thing in the world to do to someone. You need to go, I'm really sorry. That must be terrible. What are you actually thinking about doing? Please give me detail. Where are you now? It's not about just suppress it. Just pretend it's not happening. You'll be fine. It'll go away. It really is a skill set. And, we spoke a lot earlier about the physical aspect of conditioning within officiating. And look, we're not at the same level as clubs, but we've got the sports scientists and all that type of thing there. I see us going from a probably 95% physical, 5% mental now with the support we get, to especially with officiating, it becoming 70-30 or 60-40. Because I think we've touched the surface. Not so much on Matt needs help, he's damaged. It's how do we get Matt to work the best with Ashley Klein, and how do we get Ash and Matt to work really well with Chris Sutton or that whole other dynamic around, communication skills, trust, all that other thing that, really as footy clubs, we tend to worry about in preseason camps. And then it's, oh shit, now we just have to worry about winning every game and making sure our bodies are fine. So, and the other thing I'd also like to touch on is I used to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning worrying about mistakes I'd made or comments that Phil Gill may have said about me or commentators may have said. But now I run a very, very small and very stressless business, a poor maintenance business up here in what I think is paradise. I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning going, oh, I've got to turn that chlorinator up at, Mrs. Jones's pool tomorrow. I can't forget to do that. So now I'm waking up and worrying just as much in a role that from everyone else would be far less stressful. And that's why I say to people that ring me now saying, I'm in a really stressful job. I'm thinking of giving it up. I'll often say, I understand, and that stress you're feeling is really, really real. It's my experience that often it's not the position that's causing the stress. It's the way that I'm dealing with it and the way I'm processing it that's causing the stress. So whether it's refereeing a state of origin or going and turning a knob on someone's pool chlorinator the next day, to me, they're kind of the same. Now, it doesn't make sense, but it still wakes me up at 3 o'clock in the morning. So, I think, and I often think, okay, let's put it into perspective. I worry about doing things, and it could be refereeing rugby league, and it could be making a 7-tackle mistake that a side wins a game in 2 points. How does an oncologist tell someone that they're going to die several times a day? How do they kiss their partner, play with their kids, talk with their mates? How do they cope? And I'm worrying about a footy match. So again, I think the word relative really, really, really comes home strong when you can understand that and think, okay, a businessman probably gets the shits just as much if his coffee's not right of a morning than a kid that hasn't eaten for 2 days in a third world country.
That's right. We're all the center of our own universes.
Exactly. And, I just wish I had that understanding as a teenager. I think life would have been, easy is not the word, a lot more understandable. Still would have good days and bad days and things you can get through on your own and other things you can't. But I think it eliminates that. I need that nice car to make me happy. I need that nice partner to make me happy. I need that stress-free job to eliminate stress. And it's not the case. It's working on yourself as a person. It's talking to as many people as possible. And it's loving yourself because it's really all that matters.
Absolutely. How do we protect our referees in the future from, I think what you just said before probably sums that up, but the psychological part of it is really, really important rather than the physicality. Obviously it is a physical job as we attained to earlier, but how are we going to protect our people in the future, the referees?
I think by doing that, I think for, every 2 physical sessions we do with officials at whatever age, whether it's, your park footy in your little district associations, we have a sports psych or a therapist attend a session about mental health. It could be decision-making under fatigue. It could be handling conflict. It could be one-on-one individual sessions about how you handle praise or constructive criticism. But we pretty much don't do that at all. I get it. And we get it at the NRL at the elite level, probably because I've said, hi, I'm doing it and it's kind of worked for me. And, but it's a job that comes with an inherent amount of stress and drama. The worst stress and drama, I believe, is the stuff you don't have control over. And so much an official does, you have no control over. We can miss a forward pass in a game that's 30-0 and no one will care. That game's 18-all, that red's dropped next week and he's a terrible or she's a terrible official and won't be seen again for a number of weeks. That's not fair. It's the same mistake. Where are all the other good decisions? So, it's that type of understanding, support, encouragement that I think we need to spend more time on. I look at the ref squad now and I look at the full-time staff. None of the full-time staff are sports psychs. We have 3, I think at the moment, 3 dedicated physical specialists. We have one physical, and we have strength and conditioning coaches and speed coaches and statisticians. I still think the game just doesn't. Well, maybe it's not the game. Maybe it's just society isn't there yet. But I just think as officials, we not only are we protecting, I think we'd get a much better result from a games point of view if, like I said, someone could help us understand each other so we can perform as a team of officials much better next week. We're still going to make mistakes. We're still going to get things wrong. However, I think it'll be better. So, crystal ball, Matt, you're the boss next week. What are you doing? Okay, I've got a full-time sports site and they're running a third of the sessions every week. Oh, how are we going to do that? Well, some of the physical aspects are going to get paid. That doesn't mean more time away from their family. It doesn't mean, we take away from something else. That's what we do. That's my feeling, my thought around it.
Did you ever get nervous before games?
Oh, yes. Worried about things, worried about remembering players' names. That was a fear of mine. And it would be players like Cameron Smith. Like Cameron would sometimes come up to me, as he often did, and I'd go, Smith, what's his first name? That's how bad my retention was like sometimes. Brent would, quiz me on the way to a ground and go through from 1 to 13, who's this player's name, that type of thing. I'd worry about that. But generally if I was officiating well, once I blew the whistle, I didn't worry about that. I focused about the ball and went from one play the ball, the next play the ball, and tried to simplify everything as much as possible. If I was starting to worry about stuff, I knew I wasn't focusing enough. If I could hear the crowd, I knew I wasn't focusing enough.
I was just going to ask, did you find a difference in a crowd of 20 versus 80,000?
Yeah, especially when COVID came about and we had no crowd at all. Two things happened there. I felt the game felt slower. And the second thing was I realized that players hated me just as much as every other referee because I could hear every comment. When you didn't have a crowd, you heard everything. You really did. And I remember after a couple of weeks, I was going, I'm not loved by everyone like I thought I was because, a lot of it got drowned out. But it does. Crowds make a massive, and I'll say State of Origins at Suncorp are much easier and much better games to officiate than they are at, what do they call Olympic Park now? Whatever stadium it is.
ANZ.
ANZ,
Accor.
Well, there you go. There's another sponsor I've forgotten. Very different. Because you lose that intense atmosphere. It's hard to explain and it's hard to quantify, but it does make a big difference. And then that's why I felt like semi-final footy was much better footy from a spectator and officiating point of view than it was the grand final, because the grand final, a lot of the crowd are there and they don't support either side. Where at a semi-final, you've got sides, State of Origins, you've got two sides where it's just, where grand finals, it's a bit, that's nice, where, there isn't that passion.
Yeah, grand finals an event, and you often have to book it so many months before you even know who was in the side. I'm a Broncos boy, and I was at last year's grand final, which was heartbreaking for me.
Yeah.
But it was a dream when I booked the tickets. We were getting off a cruise ship the morning of the grand final, so we booked the tickets not knowing, having a clue who was going to be in there.
Yeah.
And I would much rather watch a game at Suncorp than I would at Accor.
Yes. Yeah, look, it's just different. I love the boutiques that, like, I know I was a referee in that competition, but Leichhardt Oval is just special for me. It's, you get 11,000 there screaming and about it. It's just, atmosphere makes a big difference. I think everyone feels it. Does it alter your decision making? No. It's bizarre how people think. Often you'll talk to players and they'll say, "Oh, sorry, Chech, I was trying to get under your skin." And I said, "But why would you? Why would you try and get under my skin? Do you think it's going to help you?" I said, "If I've got the shits with you and I don't have the shits with the other player and I've got a 50-50 decision, I'm not going to go with you. I'm a human." And they go, "Oh, I thought I'd be able to pressure you. I said, no, you just give me the shits. I don't like you when you're like that. If there's another player that hasn't given me the shits, they're going to get the ball. I think I speak for most other referees. And often players, they genuinely think, oh, send the captain up. You've got to get his ear. Well, if they've got something genuine to say and something that we can all get out of, yeah, sure, talk to the referee. But if you're doing it just to give him the shits, it's not going to work in your favour. It's dumb. It's just a reality of how we are as human beings. And I think that's why we'll go back to Cameron Smith. He did it really well. He'd come up, talk to you, and you'd feel like going, let's order a coffee and having a chat about it, because he'd engage with you. He'd go, Chech, I agree with that last penalty against us. I'll go and have a word to him. But can you keep an eye on number 8 on the other side? Because his arm seems to always get caught up around the ball when he's making a tackle. And he says, I don't think he's doing it. It seems to be slowing it down. He said, just, can you keep an eye on it for me? And I'm going, number 8. And then next time it happens, I'm going, oh, he is too. Where the other coach would go, oh, give us a fucking go. We're not getting the bounce of the ball, and it's very different conversations. So yeah, it does make a difference.
Did you ever have a beer with players or coaches?
No, and I regret it, because when I have refereed in the UK, you do. After every game, the refs go to a dinner with both teams, and it's a great opportunity to talk. I remember once, the first time I went over, there was an ex-Tigers player playing for an English side, and we're back at the function after an international game, and he comes up and he goes, Chech, I need to have a word to you about a decision you made 4 years ago. You may not remember it, but it kind of happened here. And I had no idea. I had not remembered it. Once I'd spoken to him about it or discussed it with him, he went, oh, I get that now. He goes, I've hated you for the last 4 years. And I said, we just don't get the opportunity to talk to each other. And that's why whenever we got asked to go and train with the players, as we do it a lot in the preseason, I used to jump, just love it, because they get to see you as a person that's not under pressure, that doesn't have a microphone. They see that you're, I use the word normal, but just like an everyday type person. You're approachable. You can talk to them. You're not under, time constraints or cameras or things like that. You can have a laugh. Unfortunately, the flip side to that is if I say something to you that could be taken the wrong way and that gets repeated to someone and that ends up in a news feed, and then you've got a drama. And it kind of, I remember it actually happened in about the 80s. There was a referee that was at a game on a Friday night, and he'd had a few beers, and he said something to a player that he was refereeing on the Sunday, and that got reported and that got out. And then it was kind of like a mandate after then. Not a mandate, but you're encouraged not to socialise or mix with players, which I think's sad, because sometimes you just need to talk things through, and you don't get the opportunity. And until you do, you dislike each other.
And there's gaps that need to be bridged.
Yeah. And COVID was really good for that. When we were all up in Brisbane in quarantine, we spent a lot of time with teams. We were, sharing washing machines and eating halls and things like that. And it just gave them an understanding of what we do, but just as importantly, us an understanding of, you know what, he didn't think I was a dickhead. He was tired. He was exhausted. He'd gotten hurt 5 minutes beforehand. I get it now.
How would you feel if your young boys now, how would you feel if they came up and said that I want to be a referee?
Well, go for it. Go for it.
Yeah.
I think being an official in any sport is a great thing. I'd encourage it from anyone, and I even look at the ex-players that we had that went through cadetships that, Luke Phillips, Brian Norrie, Henry Paranaru, Benny Galea, they've all loved the experience. They've enjoyed the camaraderie, the pressures, the nights away, the travel trips. I don't know if it's the same as being in a team, but we've still got friendships with a lot of them. So it's a valuable part of society and sport. The same way we all are. And if he said, I want to be a politician, I'd go, oh, why? But the reality is it's the same kind of thing. You're doing something because you have a passion about assisting or making change and trying to get the best outcome. I certainly wouldn't talk anyone out of it.
Excellent.
Yeah. And look, and I have had referees come to me and say, look, I've been offered a first-time contract with the NRL. I've got a very successful career. My family's very happy where we are. I need to move countries or move states to do it. I will have serious conversations about them managing their expectation in saying, if you made all those changes for a full-time contract with the referees and you never made first grade, how would you feel? And if the answer is disappointed or concerned that it will put things under pressure for their family, then I would advise them to think twice. And I have done that. Great referee, had potential of being a top-line first grade referee in the NRL, had done test matches in the country that they come from. But after having discussions with them, I think I made them aware that getting to first grade, doing a grand final or doing a state of origin doesn't make you a happier person. And if you don't do all that, what sort of pressure do you put under, the rest of your life? And is it worth it? That's a very different answer to wanting to be a referee.
What's your favorite memory of being a referee?
Probably when I was refereeing a semi-final in Brisbane. It was Brisbane and St. George. It was Darren Lockyer's last game. And I was refereeing with Tony Archer. It was when we had the 2 referee system in. And I remember I was refereeing at the time and play was being passed and all of a sudden the crowd just exploded. Now, unbeknown to Tony and I, Darren Lockyer had gone down in back play and was getting attended by a trainer. And all that happened is that he got up. And because it was his last game, Suncorp just erupted. Arch and I looked at each other and thought, oh, what the fuck have we missed? Have we got a streaker? I remember that moment. I remember the Sharks Storm grand final where Storm had the ball in the dying minutes. Everyone assumed like we did that they were going to score and they didn't. Ben Cummins and I looked at each other and went, oh, shit, they haven't won the game. That's unusual. Doing my first test match in Evanion and probably my first appointed first grade game at Leichhardt Oval to 2,000 people in the crowd buckling down with rain in 2001. So yeah, there's a lot of memories, but very few of them are actually based around decision makings or stuff ups or being in the right spot at the right time. A lot of it's got to do with relationships and trips away and friendships form.
Circumstances.
Yeah, definitely. It's, leaning over and giving my mum a hug. I forget what it was. It was at ACOR. It was either after a grand final or a state of origin or something like that. Just sharing moments, with special people. For me, it's not about the number of games or the time. Like this, seriously, for over 20 years, it felt like I was hardly there at all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It feels like it was a blink now. Do I feel like I retired too early? No. Do I miss it? Yes. Do I regret it? No. I was really fortunate to carry out a dream, and do it.
What was the tipping point for you to decide to retire?
I wasn't getting the top games anymore. I understood why. I would get appointed to the games that were high risk. So it would be games that would be hard to referee, that if you gave to a young or an experienced referee, it could hurt them long term because it'd be tough physical games, difficult captains, maybe lopsided games, things like that. And I wanted those high profile top end games because in some ways they're a lot easier to referee because the skill level's better. There's less decision making, so there's less chance of making your stuff up. When you've got 2 average sides that don't have the skill level, there's a lot more natural decision making you have to make as an official. Did that ball get knocked on or knocked back, or was that forward or back, or was that high or not high? And just through sheer numbers, you're going to make more errors. You do a state of origin that's flying, you actually don't have to make a lot of decision because its skill level's so high. And the other thing was I couldn't feel comfortable making mistakes anymore. So I'd genuinely feel bad when I'd make a mistake against the player and saw that I caused them grief. So they'd blow up from a decision I'd make and I'd realize that decision is wrong. And then I'd genuinely feel bad. And the sports side basically said, Matt, your cup's pretty full. You've ticked every box you wanted to. Is there anything else you want to achieve in this game? And I went, no. Well, maybe that drive and that determination is the reason why you've now replaced that desire and that hunger with worry and concern and genuine, before it used to be, oh, well, that's part of refereeing. You're going to, make 10 decisions. You're going to get one wrong. It's unfortunate, but that's how it is. But towards the end, it was like, I feel really bad. I need to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go for a walk, or I need to buy a packet of cigarettes, or I need to. And the reality was I didn't need to do any of those things. I wasn't dealing with the situation properly. And collectively, between Brent, myself, and our sports side, being up in Brisbane during COVID, and it was a brilliant way to retire. I was around the referees and their families 24/7. It was fantastic. It was such a great experience. We'd be going out for dinners. We'd be having games of cards. We'd be looking after each other's kids. It was just a really special time to, I'd known all these people for over 20 years, or most of them, but never spent that much time with them. And it was just a really good way to say goodbye to them all. So yeah.
How much longer before the last game did you make that decision? How much time did you give yourself?
It would have been roughly, it was in that last year. I think it was either just before or just after we moved to Brisbane. I'm pretty sure it was just before. Because the decision, from my recollection now, is I rang my shrink and said, I don't know whether I want to go to Brisbane. I don't know whether I want to uproot Brent and make Alice Kim to come to Brisbane. I don't know whether I want to call it stumps. I think it was round 3 or 4 or something like that. And he goes, oh, and I went, what do you mean? Oh, he goes, you've done a lot in this game. Do you just want to disappear in round 3? You can if you want, and you can do whatever you want, but how would you like to finish? So chatted to Brent, and he said, well, look, Brent said, it could be an experience we'll never get again. And I really didn't think it would be as good as what it was. But it was just fantastic. It was really, really good. And so glad that I went. I missed out on the semi-final. It was only the second year in a row that I'd missed out on the semi-finals for my whole career. I was disappointed, but I understood why. I was never going to get the grand final, and it gave an opportunity to give someone else experience that could one day do the grand final. And then got that guard of honor in my very last game, which I'd never seen before or heard of before. Something that I, it was a fairy tale ending for me. Very, very happy.
Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure to talking to you, mate. Thank you for sharing your experiences. I hope people get an understanding of the damage that they could potentially do by being these keyboard warriors, by seeing the human beings behind the job. That's what this podcast is all about, by seeing people that do these jobs. So, mate, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate everything you've done through your NRL career. Without referees, we don't have a game. And as a fan of the game, I've certainly said my share of words towards referees, but ultimately, when people get personal, I've always drawn the line because it's without referees.
Oh, look, it's so different to getting pulled over by a policeman for speeding. You've got the shits and you hate them, but they're the first person you call when you need them. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like that. And sure, the game wouldn't exist without referees, but I would not have got the opportunity to do what I love without the game. So it works both ways. To do what we do, as much as we do, we all love it. You couldn't not do it for any other reason other than that. So thank you for your time. Appreciate the opportunity and keep doing the good work that you do. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay. Thanks, Matt. Bye, everyone. We'll see you at the next one. Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond the Call. If you like what we're about, please make sure you subscribe, and if you can leave a review, that would be appreciated. If you have feedback or suggestions for future guests, please contact me via my socials. Please share with your networks and help me expand my reach. It's a great privilege for people to share their stories and allow us to go beyond the call.